Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Unstuck movement. Today, this is the Unstuck Business, where we talk about tools and testimonies for business breakthrough. Speaking of business breakthrough, I have the founder of Modern Networking with us, the creator and founder of BNI, Dr. Ivan Misner, on the podcast. And Ivan, I'd like to jump into these episodes straight into a question that's impactful, that will leave an impression and build breakthrough in people's lives. And the question I have for you is, how does one create work-life balance?
Yeah. So, I did a book called Who's in Your Room, and I talk a little bit about this in there. And here's the secret to balance. So for all of your viewers and listeners, I've got the secret. Are you ready to hear it?
Yes, please.
Everybody lean into the computer or your phone or listen carefully in your car. Here's the secret to work-life balance. Forget about balance. You'll never have it. And, when I say this to a live audience, big group of people, I almost always hear in the front few rows, oh, it's like,
oh no,
really? Seriously? That's your answer? Well, it gets better. I believe balance, especially if you're an entrepreneur, if you're in business, balance it's almost impossible. We look at balance like scales. And, every scale's got to be completely in balance with each other. Your work has got to be in balance with your personal life, which has to be in balance with your social life and your health and your spirituality. And life's not a balancing act. Life is a juggling act. You are constantly juggling things. And although I don't think balance is possible, I do believe we can live a life of harmony. And this is more than semantics. Even the graphic for harmony, the yin and the yang, are out of balance if you separate them. So if you take that graphic and separate it, it's out of balance. And so there are a number of things that one can do to live a life of harmony, not of balance. I lived a very unbalanced life. I have 2.5 million miles that I've traveled on one airline alone.
Wow.
So, I traveled a lot. I had kids. I wanted to be part of their life. And so I'll give you 2 or 3 quick things to create a life of harmony versus balance. One is be here now. Wherever you are, be there. Don't be at work thinking about the fact that you didn't spend time with the family last night, and don't be at home thinking about the work project that's got to be done. Be fully and completely present. It's not easy, but it is possible to do. The other is to create margins in your life. Margins, just like in a book, where you have space. You take time off. For me, I have a mental health day 1 day a week where I don't work. I'll swim in the pool, the hot tub. I'll binge watch something on TV. I'll take my boat out. But it's recharging your batteries. And there are many more things that I talk about to create a life of harmony in Who's in Your Room. But those are at least a couple of things. And I think if you live it with harmony, you're not beating yourself up all the time, because you recognize, okay, right now I'm doing more of this, but next week I'm going to do more of this, or tonight I'm going to do more of this. And so you have this constant ebb and flow, which works way better than beating yourself up because your life is out of balance.
So true, right? Because that's what happens. You end up torturing yourself, beating yourself up because you feel out of balance.
Yeah.
And so accepting the fact I can't be in balance as I'm growing and changing and evolving, but I can be in harmony. That's a really beautiful way of putting that. The work.
It is.
From
and
now
it
on,
works. Let me tell you one real quick story. I was. This is my son's 30, so he was 17 when this happened. We were in front of a big screen TV, and we're playing Halo, the game Halo, and he's kicking my butt, and we're leveling up, which buffers, and you have to sit there for a minute or so. And I said to him, I said, he was 17. I said, hey, buddy, was I around enough for you as you were growing up? He said, what? I said, was I around enough for you as you were growing up? And he said, you're around all the time. I'm like, well, I don't know if you noticed, but I'm actually gone every other week for at least 3 or 4 days.
Flyer miles I put in.
Yeah. And he's like, yeah, I know you travel, but I don't know. It's like when you're here, you're totally here. Can we get back to the game now? And I'm like, yes, we can get back to the game now. And that to me is a testament to living a life of harmony versus balance.
I love that. Just asking those questions to your kids is so important, right?
Yeah.
Those questions are so important because they can, and when you ask them at times when you're engaged in something like a video game or going for a walk or bike rides or whatever it is, you get the most honest answers.
Yes, you do.
Yeah.
Unvarnished.
Yeah, that's really good. Speaking of Halo, I failed out of college back in the day because of Halo 2. So I was out of balance because of that game for a period of my life. So before we go any further, I have to introduce the show, the Unstuck movement, the Unstuck business, right? This platform is to help you find those breakthroughs in your life and in your business. I got to thank the sponsor, the Connected Leaders Academy. Check out connectedleadersacademy.com. And if anybody doesn't know, Dr. Ivan Misner is the founder of BNI, the world's largest business networking organization with over 11,100 chapters globally. Last year alone, BNI generated 15.1 million referrals, resulting in more than $23.3 billion worth of business for its members. Ivan is a New York Times bestselling author and has been named the father of modern networking by Forbes and CNN. So going back, I love the book, Who's in Your Room? What an amazing book that is. And I want to touch on this now since we were on that subject. How do we, first of all, I guess just give us a brief overview of this concept of who's in your room. But I want to talk about going back to your kids, right? How do we make sure that we have the right people in the rooms of our children? And what does that mean?
Yeah. So see if I can give you 2 minutes on the concept of the book. Imagine you live your life in one room, and that one room has only one door. And that one door is an enter only door, so that when people come into your life or into your room, they're there forever. You can never get them out. Now, luckily it's a metaphor. So, you look at it and you feel like it's a metaphor. But the truth is, it's not. I think it's way more than a metaphor. So what I'd like you to do, Rob, is I want you to think of someone that you got out of your life. Because people say it is a metaphor. I can get people out of my room. I can get them out of my life. All right. So let's talk about that. I want you, Rob, to think of someone you got out of your life. They were toxic. They were difficult. They were mean. Whatever it was. Now, I'm not going to make you name them, so you can be safe. But I want you to think of someone. Mm-hmm. And if you're listening or watching this, I want you to think of someone as well. Put someone in your mind that you got out of your life. And now, do you have somebody in mind, Rob? You don't have to say who.
Several people, yes.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, pick one.
Okay.
Okay. Now think of a specific thing they did that you said, that's it. They're out of my life. I'm not going to have them in my life anymore. I want you to feel the anxiety or anger or frustration when you decided that. You got it? You feel it a little bit?
Yeah, I got it. Yeah, spot on.
Well, they may not be in your life, but they're still in your head. And they're going to be in your head for the rest of your life. Mm-hmm. Because the relationships that we have with people, they become part of our life. And the room starts on one temple and ends on the other temple. It's everything in between. It's your head. It's your mind. And so the experiences that you have with people, it's going to be in your head, good and bad. And so your future decision-making will be made based on the people that you've let into your room throughout your lifetime. And that's why it's really careful. You have to be really careful about who to let in. And I think you had a second part of that question regarding children, I think.
So we were talking about this before we started the episode, and talking about, when you learn all the things that you learn in life, you wish you could go back and go back to 7th grade, do it all over again, right? And so when you have kids, you're like, oh, I can impart these things that I've learned onto my kids. But the hilarious part really is they don't want to listen to you half the time. No. Right? They don't want to hear it. So how do we help our children impact who's in their room and get that message through to them?
You got to engage them to do it with you or on their own. And here's a great story that I think illustrates that really well. A friend of ours, Stuart and Emery and I, who co-wrote the book, a friend of ours, Rick Sapio, was working with a family and talking about one of the most important things that we discuss in the book, which is you have to start with understanding your values. When I talk to people and I say to them, give me your top 7 personal values, it's like deer in the headlights. They'll say, oh, honesty. Okay, great, honesty. Everybody says that. Give me 6 more. And it's deer in the headlights. They don't know what their values are. And so you got to get really good with your values to know who to let you into your room. So this couple, husband and wife, had a daughter who was 18 and was seeing this guy in his early 20s who they were pretty sure was selling drugs. And they weren't positive, but he certainly was not the kind of influence that they wanted to have on her. And so rather than say, which actually I think they did say, he's a bad influence, so none of that worked. So what they did was they said, hey, honey, we're doing this little exercise about what our own personal values are. Here's what your mom's, values are. Here's what some of my values are. We'd love for you to think about what are your values. And by the way, and they said this to her, no wrong or right answers. Your values are your values. So what are the things that are most important to you in life? And they explained what values meant, and they showed examples of values. And so the daughter went away, and overnight she was working on what her values were. And she came back and shared them with the family. And the family's like, this is fantastic. These are great values to live by. We love them. Well, here's the amazing thing. It was like a week or two later, she came down to breakfast. And she said, she started eating, and she said, oh, I broke up with whatever his name was. I broke up with him last night. And of course, the parents, I've been in a situation like this where like you almost spit out your food. They're like,
start celebrating.
Yes, you don't want to go, yay. So instead, they were like, they held it in and they were like, oh, that's really interesting. Why? We think that's, a good choice, but why? What made you decide that? And she said, I've really been thinking about my values. And I realized that his values were just completely incongruent with mine. And she didn't use those words, but his values weren't my values. And that's not what I wanted in my life. And so I broke up. Boom. That's the way you do it.
Man,
you get them to think about their values and them to think about who they're bringing into the room. And then they're going to follow through on it, not you.
That's so good. And I'm logging that one away because I'm definitely going to be using that as time goes on. That's really good. And also for ourselves personally, like you said, people are deer in the headlights when you talk about values. You need to know what your values are. At least top 3, but top 6 should be in there for sure, that you can just kind of spit them out, because that's a way you're going to assess situations every day, every interaction you have.
And they should be, it shouldn't be, 20. You need 5, 7, something that you can repeat to people easily. And that doesn't mean that you don't have other values, but what are your top 5 to 7 values? Your top ones that are important. And by the way, they can be aspirational. They can be like, I'm not there yet, but I want to move in this direction. And so it's an aspirational value.
I'm curious, what are your top values?
Well, my top values I've incorporated very succinctly into the company that I started, into BNI. And the first of the core values that I have, that the organization has, is givers gain. This idea, 2 simple words, but this idea that if you want to help other people, if you want people to help you, you got to help them first. And so you go in giving, helping, supporting people. And when you do that, you get help and support in return. And in BNI's case, it's referrals as well as, business help and support, but referrals in particular. Lifelong learning is one of my core values. When you're not learning, you're becoming stale. And so it's really important that you constantly be learning. It doesn't mean you have to keep going to school, but read books and listen to podcasts like this. This is something, what are you putting in your head? Mm-hmm. Are you putting things in your head that'll make you a better human or a better business person, or are you just putting mindless pablum into your head? And by the way, I'm okay with a little mindless pablum, a little bit, to relax and, just let everything go out of my head. But then sometimes you got to listen to things like this. Accountability is one of my top values. Building relationships. I'm in a networking organization, so building relationships is one of my top values. And one that is unusual is traditions plus innovation. I made it one core value because I think they're both important. Traditions tell us who we come from as a tribe, but innovation tells us where we want to go. So those are some of my core values, and I've incorporated those into the core values of BNI.
As I asked that question, I've been in BNI for 2 years, by the way, and I love it. Absolutely love the organization. It's been incredibly helpful for me personally and professionally. And I should have guessed those were your values, because those are the values of BNI, but I didn't know those two things were side by side. And I love traditions plus innovation. That's
Yeah.
actually, of all the core values, I think that might be my favorite, because of the concept of, like, we have to live by tradition while we continue to innovate, and we can have both at the same time. And it seems like sometimes our culture wants to either be traditional
Yeah.
and, stay where we are, or be innovative and move forward. And they don't combine the two. Why can't we have those two things
Why can't?
combined?
Well, you can. I believe you can, and we certainly have in BNI. I mean, people think of us as an in-person organization, which we are, but we also do a lot online. And you can't have a three-letter domain, BNI.com. You can't have a three-letter domain if you're not an early adopter to technology.
Yeah, or you spend a lot of money to buy that domain.
Well, I didn't. So I was an early adopter. And at the same time, culture is important, because the core values build the culture, and culture eats strategy for breakfast. Culture is the secret sauce, the DNA. The core values are the DNA of an organization. The culture is the result of the implementation of effective core values. So, not all my core values are BNI. I'll give you one that is a marriage core value. Core value, obviously, fidelity is always a core value, but let me give you an interesting one that I think people don't necessarily think of. In my marriage, my wife and I want to hang out with other couples who both love and respect each other.
Mm.
That's a core value. We want to hang out with couples who love and respect each other. Now, look, couples, I may not always be as loving as I could be, and she may not be as respectful as she could be, but we both really try hard to be that with each other, and we look in for that in others. We don't want to hang out with people who treat each other, couples who treat each other disrespectfully, or treat each other unlovingly.
Yeah.
And so that's a core value in my relationship with my spouse.
I love that. What a great core value to have. And what a great, because when you find couples like that, you just want to be around them more, and they
Yes.
inspire you to be a better couple.
They do, and they're fun to be around, and interesting, and comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? It's easy. It's not always a struggle, or you feel on edge around couples.
Yeah, there's nothing worse than that tension you can feel between a couple when you're hanging out. That's rough. It's hard.
We've all been there, and you're just gonna go, okay. Yeah, maybe we should be going now.
Yeah. How long is this? Where's the food? How long is this dinner going to last? So right now we got to jump into a quick sponsor, 60-second ad, right? But before we do that, I want to prep what's coming up next, because I really want to talk about the third paradigm and talk about the age of co-creation that we are stepping into. This is something that means a lot to you, and I want to learn more about co-creation in business and what that looks like. We'll talk about that in 60 seconds.
Great.
Hi, my name is Jose Escobar, and I'm the founder and CEO of the Connected Leaders Academy. We're a growing tribe, a community of entrepreneurs all over the world, globally, all across the country, high performers, titans of industry. If you're an entrepreneur and you're looking to grow personally and professionally, scale your influence, develop your skill sets, move the needle in your business, more clients, more money, more profit, the bottom line, and of course, grow your circle and your network like never before, this is where you want to be. Join the Connected Leaders Academy today. We are scaling massively. We want to welcome you in. Check me out on Instagram and on Facebook, the @ JAESCO25. We look forward to having you join us. Take care.
So, Ivan, your most recent book is The Third Paradigm. And in that, you talk about 3 different eras throughout business, right? The era of competition, the era of cooperation, and the era of co-creation. And it's interesting when reading this book, because we're stepping into this era of co-creation, yet and I'm curious how you feel about this, because I still see so much competition and so much of a mindset of competition. Although, as you said, in the 60s, we stepped into this era of cooperation, and now stepping into this era of co-creation. What does that mean to you? And why do we still see so much competition if the mindset is stepping into the era of co-creation?
Well, look, cooperation didn't eliminate competition, and co-creation is not going to eliminate competition, but it's a process that takes place over time. I mean, there's always we have competitors, but the question is, how do you want to interact with those competitors, and are there opportunities to actually work with competitors to create something together? When I was a management consultant, I worked with other consultants who theoretically were competitors with me, but had a special expertise. And I would work with them on my clients with their expertise, and they would bring me in with my expertise. So all three are important, but the co-creation, I think that's the future. And the best example of it is crowdsourcing. Everyone recognizes crowdsourcing. And the co-creation is an example of crowdsourcing. And we surveyed over 4,000 people. So this isn't just our opinion, but we surveyed over 4,000 people to talk about what are the things that make co-creation work and what are the challenges, because there's always challenges trying to implement something like this.
It was a good example of co-creation. Would that be like Apple's App Store, like where a company creates something and then the co-creation, anybody can submit something to that App Store, and now you're collaborating with everybody in the world potentially.
Yeah, and open source would be another good example of co-creation, where people are creating Wikipedia with all the challenges that Wikipedia presents. Wikipedia is an example of crowdsourcing. Good, mostly good, some bad, but it's these are all examples of co-creation. And in there, you said, I don't know if you've seen the book, but can I share a secret just with us?
Yeah.
Can I share a secret with you?
Please.
Yeah. All right. So you can't tell anybody other than the millions of people that are listening to this podcast. Throughout the book, we talk about the survey, and we have hard data, and we know that diversity of ideas, learning from each other, stronger relationships are the top three characteristics of co-creation, and that the three challenges are personality conflicts, dealing with egos, and poor communication. So we have that hard data. But what we did was we interwove into every chapter, my co-authors and I, a story about Richard, a true story about Richard, and the online development, the development of an online program. We never say what I'm about to say next. We do say it's true, but here's the stuff that's, if you're listening to this and you pick up the book, you're going to know the truth. Richard is my middle name. The online platform is BNI Connect. So if you want to read a story about someone who went through competition, then cooperation, both screwed up badly, and then went to co-creation, read the story with that in mind. If you're a BNI member, read the story with the fact that Richard is me, and the online platform is BNI Connect. And it really takes the reader through all three elements of a business and how co-creation was much more successful. The reason we didn't name me as the protagonist in the piece was that we wanted people to read it for the story, not read it for the fact that it was one of the co-authors.
I love that, man. And what a journey I'm sure that you've gone through since 1985, correct? Creating BNI.
Yeah. It was Mr. Toad's wild ride over the years. It really was. All right, so you want to hear a couple of the things. So we have co-creation, you're dealing with people. And when you're dealing with people who are coming from different perspectives, you want to hear two or three techniques that I share in the book, or that we share in the book, to help deal with not competition, but conflict.
All right. Conflict resolution, huge thing to talk about. We all deal with it. How do we deal with it?
Yeah. Well, when you're particularly, one-to-one conflict is a little bit different. There's a book I recommend called Crucial Conversations, which is a great book for those kind of one-on-one, but it also applies on a broader scale. But in this book, we talk about a couple of things that I think are really important. And one of the strategies is listen till they drop. Listen till they drop. And in the story about Richard, about me, there was a situation where I knew people were really mad. Rob, they were really, really, really mad at me. I mean, furious mad.
Okay.
If it had been the Dark Ages, I'd have been taken out and drawn and quartered. They were not happy. So I figured I'm just going to let them vent. And they vented for for 2.5 hours. For 2.5, and I wrote down every complaint. Wow. I wallpapered the entire room with all of the complaints and issues. So I go into it more in the book, but listen till they drop is one. Second is take responsibility. Don't blame others. I took responsibility, and then I listened till they dropped. I shut up. But do go in with a plan. Just don't share the plan until everybody has had a chance to vent. I'll give you one more, and if you want some others, I'll give you others. Bring in barking dogs. The barking dogs are the people who are really, really upset. And it seems counterintuitive to have some of the people who are really, really upset in the room. But if you don't let some of them in the room, not all of them, because then it gets chaos. But if you don't let some of them in the room, they're going to be outside the room barking.
Yeah.
And getting other people riled up. So when you're dealing with conflict, make sure that some of the barking dogs are always in the room, because you want them to go out and say, okay, all right, I told him what I thought. I gave him heck. And, this is what we're going to do now. And it helps to turn things around. I think I have 15 or 16 different strategies to employ in conflict with co-creation.
And so I'm curious, you implement listen till they drop. You implement taking responsibility, clearly bringing in the barking dogs. How did things change in this scenario because you did that? How did things transform because you allowed all of that to happen and you were humble enough to allow this to take place?
Well, I'll tell you, Rob, I knew that day, and I say this in the book, I knew that day was going to be the worst day of my professional career or the best day of my professional career. And I didn't know which one it would be until the first 3 hours, 2.5, 3 hours of the meeting. I think one of the important things to consider is you do go in with a plan, just don't share the plan until they get everything out. And I mean, everything. It was like we were 2 hours into it and they started slowing down and they were feeling bad for me. And at one point I said to them, you cannot call me a week from now and say, I had 2 or 3 more, but it was going long and I didn't want, you can't do it. I won't take your call. I want it all today. I want you to tell me everything you hate about this platform. And of course they did. And it went on longer. But you go in with a plan, and part of the plan has got to be resolution. If all you do is focus on problems, you become an expert at the problem. You also have to focus on solutions. So I came in with a plan. I suggested the plan, which was total co-creation. That was, let's create a project board. The project board will have full authority to make all decisions relating to these 500 complaints that we've wallpapered the room with. I will make no decision other than the budget. I got to give you the budget. If I want something changed, I'll throw it into the mix and the project board will make all the decisions. Now, if I'd have said that to begin with, they wouldn't have heard it because they were so mad. They needed to vent. But by the time I had that as a suggestion, and I started it with, I have an idea. Are you guys open to an idea? Well, I had a plan. I had it written out, but I didn't want them. I wanted them to just feel heard, which they did. Yeah. And they said yes. Then what you got to do is you got to bring it full circle with something positive. And so the fact that everyone kind of agreed on the plan was good. Then I handed out, this is going to sound so silly, I handed out buttons, big, at the time our BNI colors were burgundy, big burgundy buttons that said Eggbok on it, EGBOK, Eggbok. And they're like, what's this? And we handed all the buttons out. And I said, hey, everybody, everything's going to be okay. Eggbok, everything's going to be okay. We're going to get through this. We're going to get through it. I helped create this problem. You're going to help solve this problem. We're going to do it. And we're going to do it together. And everyone's like, yeah, Eggbok, okay. And then that was just a small group. Then I went to the convention, kind of explain what happened. And then I had a guy, we handed out buttons. Everybody's got buttons. And then we had a guy who got up and he made up an Egg Box song. And so the whole convention is like, everything's going to be okay. Everything's going to be okay. And so that part of the plan was that if it worked, that they felt heard, then we can introduce a plan, and then we can calm everyone down. And that's what we did.
Incredible, Ivan. I mean, I just love the ability, the humility to be able to go in and own all that, and to letting people yell at you for 2.5 hours alone, like to be able to withstand all of that. Where does that will come from you? Where does the humility come from? Is it something that you were born with, that you grew up with in your family, or you developed over time?
No. Listen, I thank you for the humility comment. I really believe that humble people don't think less of themselves; they just think of themselves less. So it's an acquired skill. When I was 13 years old, my mother gave me a paperweight. I have it to this day, and it says, "Diplomacy is the art of letting someone else have your way." Diplomacy is the art of letting someone else have your way. She said, "Honey, I love you. You are a bull in a china shop. You just knock stuff over. You have got to learn how to work with people." She said, "This is about collaboration, not manipulation, but you got to learn how to work with people." And so it was an acquired skill over time. And I think any situation like this, and I talk about this in the book, is that you have to hold the vision, not the obstacles. There are always obstacles, but you got to keep bringing people back to the vision. This is the vision. Yeah, we've got an obstacle, but this is the vision. I mean, look at BNI. When I started BNI in 1985, people thought it was Amway. They thought it was a multi-level marketing thing. They didn't know what BNI was. That was one of my obstacles. Creating systems and processes, that was one of my obstacles. Having it go national was an obstacle, international, an obstacle. When we had the online platform, obstacle. But every time I held the vision, COVID, oh my goodness. So I say to people, did you have obstacles in your business in the past? Yes. Do you have obstacles now? Yes. Do you think you'll have obstacles tomorrow? Yeah. Okay. So they're always going to be there. What you have to have, the guiding light, your North Star, has to be the vision. Mm-hmm. And if you can keep bringing people back to the vision, and we had a clear vision of what we wanted to do with that platform. If you keep bringing people back to the vision, you can deal with the obstacles more effectively. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I mean, that's it, right? If you don't have a vision, and you don't have a clear vision, and you don't hold to the vision and everything, then all of the obstacles become the vision. Every obstacle becomes the things you're tripping over all day long. But if you stay focused on one main core vision, those obstacles will become stepping stones, right? That resistance will become momentum that ends up propelling you forward.
Yeah, 100%.
Where, for your vision, right? You've done so much. BNI has been just what a global organization. I mean, for yourself, I'm curious, did you ever see it becoming this huge? Was your vision at the beginning like, hey, I want to be all over the world? When I'm in BNI Connect, and I have people email me from Dubai. I'm in Altoona, Pennsylvania, and people email me from Dubai to connect from BNI. I'm like, this is insane. Did you envision that back in the day?
Well, not when I started BNI. When I started BNI, I just needed some referrals for my consulting practice, and I wanted to help my friends. But it snowballed. What I didn't realize is that we don't teach this in colleges and universities, and people were hungry for referrals. So I ended up opening 20 chapters the first year, really kind of by accident. I mean, I really didn't have a plan. But then I realized that I had struck a chord in the business community. And so between Christmas and New Year's of every year, I take some time off and I reflect how am I doing? Where do I want to go? And that year was like, what the heck just happened? Because that wasn't in my plan at all. Mm-hmm. And that was my Brody moment. Remember Sheriff Brody when the shark comes out and he turns around to the captain and says, "You're going to need a bigger boat."
Oh, right.
That was my Brody moment. And so what I did was I went to, you didn't have Monsieur Google back then, right? So I went to the university library where I was teaching. And every week I would pick up reference books for population. And I, over a course of a couple of months, calculated that BNI would someday have 10,000 chapters, over 10,000 chapters. And I remember telling a friend of mine, Bruce, and this was only a year and a half into BNI, okay, Rob? And I
Wow.
said to Bruce, I think this BNI thing, I think someday we could have 10,000 chapters.
Wow.
And he laughed at me and he said, and how many chapters do you have now, Ivan? I said, 30. He said, you have 30 chapters and you think you can have 10,000. I said, yeah, I absolutely believe we can have 10,000 chapters. And I've held that vision ever since. And in 2020, we hit 10,000.
That's a real visionary kind of mindset.
And here's the most amazing thing. I want to hear your last question, but here's the most amazing thing. You opened up by saying we passed 15.1 million referrals, 23.3 billion in what we call thank you for closed business. That's the amount of business that is generated for the members from those referrals. Now, here's the incredible thing. Based on United Nations estimates of GDP, gross domestic product, there are actually 100 countries in the world with a lower GDP than what BNI generated for its members in 2023.
Wow.
Yeah. Wow. It blows my mind.
Wow. If somebody who thinks BNI
more
doesn't,
business than countries, the GDP of countries.
that's incredible. That's a great selling point for somebody who doesn't know what BNI is about. That's a really good metric. Going back to vision, because vision is so important. How do you help somebody who doesn't know how to establish a vision for their life, for their business? Because a lot of people really struggle with that. They struggle with developing a clear vision. You seem to be somebody who's just a visionary by nature, or maybe it was you taught it to yourself, or I don't know. But how do you help other people develop a vision like you have for BNI?
Well, let's talk about personal, and then let's talk about business. Personal, wherever you're at in your age, if you're in your 20s, that's great to start creating a vision for yourself. But even 40s or 50s, do it now. If you go, I have a blog that I've been blogging since 2007. It's called ivanmisner.com, MISNER, ivanmisner.com, and do a search on 40-year plan. Do a little parentheses, 40-year plan. Do a search on there. You'll find I published my 40-year plan when I turned 60. I published it. And I literally in my 20s wrote my 40-year plan. And my 40-year plan was in my 20s, I was going to basically, it was about education, going to college, going to graduate school, being a sponge, learning as much as I can. 30s was to pick a professional lane and really strive to excel in that professional lane. My 40s were to be really a leader in whatever field I was. My 50s would be the top of my game. I would be one of the best experts in whatever field I picked, and I didn't even know what field I was going to pick in the 20s. And then in my 60s, I wanted to be the elder statesman. And so if you go to ivanmisner.com, look for 40-year plan, you'll find what I wrote, and that might give you some ideas on what you can do. As for your business, you got to think about, don't think about what you do. I have a friend in the UK, Andy Bounds. He calls this, think about your afters. It's not what you do that counts. It's what it looks like after you do what you do. What's the world look like? What's your community look like? What do your clients look like? What impact are you going to have? And it needs to be a big, hairy, audacious goal. BNI's vision statement is changing the way the world does business. And we do that through our philosophy of giver's gain. This idea, and we didn't teach us, networking in the past was very, very transactional. It still is in the wrong environments. Very transactional. Hi, my name's Ivan, let's do business. Well, in BNI, it's all about building relationships. That's the key. And so anybody can create it, but you gotta spend time thinking about it. I mean, you really set an hour aside and just think about it. And you may not have it all by then, but then you can start, and the next week give it another hour, and the next week give it another hour, until you have a pretty clear vision. And you can change that as time goes on, but try to create a big vision that makes a difference for people.
That's really, really true, Ivan. I've talked about this several times in the past. There's a great book called Deep Work, right? And deep work is that go sitting by yourself and,
Yep.
and thinking about these things, spending the time really thinking about these things. And right now there's 3 screens in front of me. I don't know about you, and I got my cell phone, right? So I can't deeply think in front of 3 screens. But if I sit on my couch over there and sit there with a notepad for an hour, I can get pretty deep.
Yeah.
And like you said, so spend that time disconnecting and thinking and letting your mind go to places, and then having the confidence and having the boldness to be like, well, if I thought it, I can do it. If I
Yes,
thought it, I can create that.
do a little research. I mean, like I did. I went to the university to see. I knew it could be big. I didn't know how big.
Yeah.
So back it up with some data if you can, so that if for no other reason, it gives you even more confidence of the possibility of achieving what you want to achieve.
Yeah. Whew. Good stuff. This has been wonderful. Dr. Ivan Misner, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today. This has been so impactful. Was there anything else you'd like to say about BNI before we sign off, or anything else you'd like to give to the audience before we sign off?
Well, thanks for letting me mention BNI. Anyone who's interested in go to bni.com for information. And I've already given you my blog, ivanmisner.com. I think one of the most important things that I learned over the last almost 40 years, we'll be celebrating our 40th anniversary as an organization in January. So we're almost 40 years old. I think one of the most important things that I learned is that networking is more about farming than it is about hunting.
Mm.
It's all about cultivating relationships with people. And it's not a get-rich-quick scheme, but it's a really great way to build a solid foundation for lifelong referrals. Referrals for life. That's what we want business people in BNI to get, referrals for life.
Yeah, those relationships are everything. Taking the time to establish those and build those. Yeah. Amazing. Well, Dr. Ivan Misner, once again, thank you so much for blessing us with your presence today and your wisdom. Thank you for being a part of the Unstuck business.
Thanks for having me on, Rob. I really appreciate it.